Hello, and welcome to Health Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen, and welcome to another episode where we're going to blow your mind. If you guys haven't already, please get over on Rumble if you're listening on YouTube. We'll be leaving YouTube by the end of the year. I know it's only March, but please get over to Rumble. Follow us there. We are already blowing up. We want to bring you more content that YouTube's not letting us do. If you listen on audio, we'll be sticking there, so you have nothing to worry about. Spotify, Apple Podcast, please go ahead and take a listen. This episode is going right back to the dads. Moms, you can listen to this too. Maybe it'll be fun. You can get off to your husband to listen to. But I really enjoyed this topic, and I think we have a great guest to really dive deep into it. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Brian. Brian, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Dude, I'm fired up to be here, Anthony. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, really excited to talk to you about this. Really want to get into a lot of fun topics. So I want you guys to just hang around, let us get through who Brian is, and you'll be definitely impressed. So without further ado, Brian, take it away. Let us know how you got into the fitness realm and started helping out dads.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know how as we get older, we become dads, our responsibilities start to pile up and we kind of feel like we're losing time. I was in that same boat back in 2018. My career was taking off. Everything on paper was checking all the boxes, right? Beautiful wife, great family, house, all those other good things. And I found myself waking up disappointed most days. And even though I had all the financial success in the world, I was running the #1 sales team in a 9-figure direct sales organization. And I was checking all the boxes that I was told I needed to hit. I would look in the mirror and I would do one of those things where, like, and a lot of guys do this, like you stand sideways a little bit and you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of growing here. And over the course of my long tenure with that same company, I ended up putting on about 45 pounds. And I was tired all the time. I was cranky all the time. I'd come home and I'd be like, I don't really want to do anything, just kind of sitting on the couch. And so I started to take a look at my health and fitness and really like, how do I build the foundational habits to become someone that is healthy? And I tried it all. So I did, I'm a big Joe Rogan guy. So of course I tried keto and carnivore. And then Game Changers came out in 2019. And I was like, maybe I got to be vegan. Maybe that's what I need to do. That didn't work out because your boy likes steaks. And then I tried Whole30. I even did Weight Watchers for like a hot second. And I would kind of up and down and lose the same 10 to like 20 pounds over and over and over again. And I just kind of wind up feeling disappointed. Well, during 2020, I had a lot of time to myself for a multitude of reasons. And so I started to dive deeper into like, what actually is it that causes us to get into the best shape of our life and to implement the right strategies and habits. And what I figured out was that every strategy works, every single one, whether it's carnivore or whether it's cutting carbs or, only eating meat and fruit or going plant-based completely. Like, it wasn't necessarily the strategy that was the issue. It was the way that I was implementing them. And so I started to kind of reframe the way I looked at health and fitness. And I started to look at it more of like an adaptive process. And I learned about a concept called adaptive habit chains and stringing together, like we all go through our day. 99% of it is all habit-based, things that we're already doing. And what I would always try to do is I would get really, really excited about all these new diets or all these new strategies or a new workout program or like, oh, I have to do metabolic conditioning or I have to confuse my muscles and all of these tools that I would learn. And I would like try to 180 my life completely. I remember I read a book called The Miracle Morning. And it was all about like a 2.5-hour morning routine. And I was like, all right, that's it. That's the secret. I got to do a 2-hour morning routine. And I would try to implement so many things all at once. And I would do it really, really well for like a week or maybe 2 weeks. And then I would immediately fall back into old habits. And that was because I wasn't understanding the psychology of the way the human brain worked. So when I got into health and fitness and I truly figured it out and I started helping other guys do it, it actually wasn't about health and fitness. It was actually about the human brain. And that was the interesting thing. And when I understood what adaptive habit chains were, and how to make small tweaks compounding over large time frames, I realized very quickly that I could actually speed up my results because everyone's trying to lose 20 pounds in 30 days. Well, when I changed my mindset from not how do I lose 20 or 40 pounds, but how do I just lose a pound this week? Not only were the habits more adaptive and I could string together more wins working in harmony with the psychology of my brain, but I actually got results faster because rather than me losing 10 pounds in a month and then putting 10 pounds back on the next month, over the course of the next 2 months, I lost 10 pounds and I kept it off. And then after 6 months of just working through adaptive habit chains through a method I now call the FAST method, 6 months later, I was down 40 pounds and it felt like a breeze. And it was quick. It was easy. It wasn't like this massive strain. I didn't have to make all these dramatic changes in my life. I just implanted certain cues and certain triggers at different times into things that I was already doing, where 6 months later, I was down 45 pounds. My sales actually in my office were up. My relationship with my wife improved. I felt like I had more energy for the family. And so a bunch of other guys that I was working with were like, we've been trying to lose weight. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's funny. Like, you change your life and everyone's like, what'd you do? Thinking that it's going to be some magic pill or a special diet. And I was like, yeah, I started walking a little bit more here. And I started doing this while I was watching TV. And I started doing this while I was reading. And then on my sales calls, I would do this. And it was just these small things that I just would attach to concepts and actions I was already taking that would compound over time. And I began to not only change my life, but change my lifestyle. So I put together a 6-month roadmap, and then guys started asking me. I started walking them through it. I beta tested like about a dozen guys back in 2020, and we just figured it out. Now we've refined it. We're on 3.0 at this point, and now guys are getting results even faster. I can say that we're getting guys more results in the first 90 days than we did 3 or 4 years ago in 6 months, because we've only gotten better at the psychology behind things, better at teaching things, better at holding guys accountable. And our community is quadrupled in size. So there's even more support for men, within our community. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm just excited to, share it with as many dads as humanly possible.
A lot of points you mentioned in there that are definitely just things we've talked about over the last 4 years. And by the way, 4 years, holy shit. Thank you for all of those that have been listening for the last 4 years. Can't believe I just said that out loud. The first thing is small habit change. We've talked a lot, and I think a lot of men can understand it more this way. You know what compound interest is? Compound interest in the financial sense is that taking 1% gain every month over the course of 30 years is going to be an unfathomably high number, and you're only working on building 1% or saving 1%. That sounds so little in the short term, or the long term, it adds to be a huge, big thing. Same thing added to what you said there with habit changes, small, incoherent habit changes that you think does nothing, like walking an extra 500 steps a day. That will add up. In a week, that's 3,500 extra steps. In a year, I'm not doing that math. But point being, it's a lot.
52 miles. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. But my point being, those small little habit changes go a long, 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 long way. And all these fad diets just don't work. You just have to find something you could stick to at the end of the day. What can I do over the time? I'm laughing in my head over some things you said. First off, last night I had 2 double cheeseburgers. So I didn't get a pound of meat last night. Like things like that, like you can work up to. People will say that's horrible for you, and it's not. Go look at my blood work. The second point is people don't want to take the small little necessary things. I was just getting my teeth cleaned, and the dental hygienist was talking about how she goes to the gym, and people spend 10 minutes fighting for that first line of spots to the gym, but won't park like 20 feet away in the open spots to then walk into the gym to then walk on the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
Little things that we just don't think about.
Right. Yeah. Well, it comes down to like our reticular activating system and our entire belief system. Everything that we've been taught about fitness is 6-minute abs, 10-minute workouts. And, all of those things are great, but we're taught that it should be microwave ready, real quick gratification. And the thing is, the human body doesn't change that quickly. And so what it takes is actually a radical change in belief systems and the story that we tell ourselves, and what I call like deep subconscious reprogramming, which sounds extremely complicated, but I boiled it down to what I call the triangle of self-influence. It's very simple. It's really only three things. What's our environment? How are we reflecting on our environment? And how are we imagining our future? That's really it. As long as we control our imagination, we pay attention to our environment, and we reflect on past decisions, we can radically change our life. And so by implementing just a simple process done in very specific steps in a chronological order, within 6 months, you can radically change the way that you even look at the world and look at fitness and how you look at yourself, most importantly.
I want to use that as a branch because I loved some of the things you mentioned in there. And the biggest one is your environment, both internally and externally. The biggest point we break down, and we've talked about this. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but what to eat, how to take care of yourselves, what to control, what kind of foods in your refrigerator, how you go grocery shopping, blah, blah, blah. I want to talk more about the external environment, something we don't really talk about much. Where you live, what you hear about on the news, what's going on at work, all those outside factors that's affecting how you think. And if you're going to sit here and tell me that nothing you hear affects how you think, you're just lying to yourself, because everybody gets affected by everything outside in their environment. It's just human nature. So what are some things that you've noticed externally that have really made an impact on dads?
So first and foremost is moving things around in the kitchen. That's the easiest thing to do. So what I do in my house and what I teach my clients, very simply put, is the pantry, right? You have your shelf, and then you have to make a decision that everything else that's not on that shelf is not yours. It's not yours to have. It's not, even if you bought it, even if you fronted the grocery bill, it's not yours. It could be your kids, it could be your wife. Now, obviously, as you change, your family will change, and they'll naturally pick up different habits anyway. And we can go into how men should be the example for their families and live every single principle and discipline themselves. But without getting too heady into that, right? A very simple change is you just have a dignified shelf. So within my house, I have one shelf. I am only allowed to eat the things that are on that shelf. If it is not on that shelf, it's not mine to eat. And so that's compounding. So we have the environmental change, right? We've actually physically moved things. And then secondly, we've changed the story, right? Because every guy, we kind of have this territorial thing like, well, I bought it, I should be able to eat it. Like I bought the Oreos, I should be able to eat it. Sure. But if you want to actually make the radical change, then you have to change the story. Another one is, and this is a little corny, but it works. It's so corny, but it works. Whenever I feel compelled to want to eat something that I know is not going to be conducive towards whether it's my macros or my goals, if I'm in a maintenance mode, I'm a lot more flexible. But right now I'm prepping for my show in June, so I have a lot more restrictions in my diet on a day-to-day basis. And so each one of my clients has their own macro strategy that's custom designed for them. So as long as we're paying attention, we can pretty much fit anything in. But let's say I want to eat something. Let's say my wife bakes cinnamon buns. She's loves these Trader Joe's cinnamon buns. Okay. And I know that I can't have it, right? I'm in a cut, or I've already maxed out my macros for the day. It's 8:00 at night, and she just baked them, and the whole house smells. It's amazing. I'm not going to tell her she's not allowed to have it, because I'm not allowed to control her. But one of the things that I do in terms of changing the environment is, if I feel compelled to eat something, I'll ask myself a simple question, right? Does that cinnamon bun have power over me? That's it. Am I going to really let this inanimate, fluffy piece of bread dictate my actions? Because if you don't ask that question and you just go, how many times have you heard somebody when you whip out the donuts or whatever it is, or chocolate, I just can't help myself. Also, what you're saying is a chocolate bar has power over you. It controls your sovereignty and your agency. That's what you're actually saying. And so while it is kind of corny, because when you think about it logically, of course, no, it doesn't. But using logic, you can then control the emotions that dictate your actions. That's it, right? So it's just a simple story change, right? Same thing with going to the gym first thing in the morning. So many of my guys are like heavy career driven, demanding career guys. They don't have time to go in the middle of the day. And going at night, battling the high school kids for the bench press is like no fun for anybody, right? We don't want to see kids in pajama pants and Crocs with their broccoli hair. We want to just get in and get out 30 to 40 minutes tops. That's all you really need. So, but waking up early in the morning to be able to get that done and still be able to take care of the kids and all that other good stuff can be challenging. Well, that's just the story that we're telling ourselves. Because if we retrain our brain to believe that by getting up early and I get my cup to be 100%, meaning I take care of my workout, I do my little mini morning routine to prime my brain. I quell the mind through proper reflection, which takes all of 3 to 5 minutes, right? My morning routine is maybe 10 minutes tops, right? Because I need something that I can do anywhere at any time. Then going to the gym and taking care of myself, then I get to show up and be the best dad possible. So by not getting up, I'm literally telling my kids that they're not worth it. They're not deserving of my best. By getting up, I tell my family that they're deserving of my best. See, that's a story that's more compelling. And when it's 4:30 in the morning and my alarm wakes me up and I'm like, oh my God, it's leg day. I do not want to do heavy squats. Then I have to remind myself that, look, my family's worth it. My wife is worth it. Everything about my family deserves my absolute best. And if I don't get up right now, I'm telling my family that they don't deserve my best.
There's yet again a lot in there, and I just want to make some comparisons why I don't think that's corny. I mean, yeah, if the services does, but look at if you replaced cinnamon bun with a beer, and then
Sure.
go through that same thing, and you start seeing similarities in how we compare alcoholics when they start saying that beer has control over me, I have to drink it. Now you start getting into questioning, well, maybe you're addicted to alcohol and all these fun things you don't want to dive into. But that's the same thing, but with sweets, with people on the surface. They just don't take it as an addictive, unhealthy thing. They truly don't understand what it is doing to their insides. Yeah, alcohol has a more immediate effect on you. You're going to see yourself drunk and sloppy and make poor decisions. Like that's immediate. But that Cinnabon is going to have negative effects. It's just going to be over the long term. So we just assume that because it's a micro negative effect over the long term, it's fine. Nothing bad's going to happen to me. But if I do that every day and I have a Cinnabon every single day, over the course of a year, we talked about compounding interest. You're going to compound the weight. You're going to compound your blood sugar, your A1C levels, and it's going to have negative connotations similar to that of booze, if that makes sense.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, most people are addicted to food and they just don't even realize it because society encourages it. Not to get into, we're not going to even touch the topic, but we all know what was incentivized by donuts a couple years back, right? Because they knew that was going to trigger like, oh, I can relate that to a donut. Donut is socially acceptable. So is XYZ. We all know what I'm talking about. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you can even go back further to Coca-Cola.
Sure.
A study I mentioned all the times where they did a study on sugar to show that sugar wasn't unhealthy. And they're like, oh, it's fats. It's not sugars. Look, we did a study. Coca-Cola sponsored it. And sugars are perfectly okay for you.
Yeah. Interesting how it plays out, right?
Yeah. Now all of a sudden, oh, no shit. We have a huge epidemic. I was just watching something really interesting yesterday. I don't know if I'm fully on board with the terminology of it, but type 3 diabetes, which is the phenomenon of your brain having an insulin issue through sugars, which is going to cause or correlate to having Alzheimer's and dementia. I can say that lack of sleep does cause Alzheimer's and dementia. That's known. That's when your brain has the ability to wash out the enzyme and the toxins of what causes it. I'm blanking on the exact term, but sleep we know is related. And we can specifically say those that do have higher sugars in their blood tend to sleep less, tend to have sleep apnea, therefore are more exposed to the correlation of having Alzheimer's and dementia. But it's all related, and that's something nobody wants, right?
Yeah. I didn't even know that they came out with a type 3. I'm sure in the next 10 years we'll have all the way up to type 5.
Yeah, it's an unofficial. I just looked it up. I didn't know it either. And it's an unofficial thing that's starting to get pushed through. And it's just interesting to see that they're doing studies on how much sugar and insulin response plays a role in the entire body as a whole. So it's just things to keep eye and open to. And then I'm just going to flat out jump into this topic because I really think it's important. We talked about it a little pre-show, but it's something that really gets to me. And it's men specifically, and specifically dads, I've noticed, where society as a whole is pushing out masculinity and testosterone. And we've talked about a lot how your environment can affect you. And having a negative environment that tells you not to be masculine because you're so used to of a culture where I'm totally guilty of it. They stopped using red pens because it hurt people's feelings. Like things like, yeah, crazy. New York is a crazy state, but little things like that where it's like, okay, now I'm a victim of everything. And I'm just a man. I'm not supposed to be victimized. Go back 30 years, guys just fought and got over it and moved on. They didn't say, oh, poor me, my old childhood. And then society is shunning it as a whole. So then men are falling into this trap where what is a guy? So now they're just saying, oh, maybe maybe there's no such thing as masculinity, which yet again is killing. And I'm only bringing this up because it's related to health. That's lowering your T levels, which is going to cause you not being able to sleep, not being able to build muscle, and you're going to have higher levels of visceral fat, which is going to kill you. Like, I don't know how else to sugarcoat it, but I wanted to get some feedback from you about what you thought about the topic and any insights.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree wholeheartedly that the world is kind of, turned against men. Look at the rise of Jordan Peterson, right? Why is he so popular? It's because men are literally screaming, whether it's silently or not, using their platform. They're looking for ways to be okay, to be them. And there's not a lot of quote unquote safe spaces to be a guy, right? Like, I mean, now the most popular and viral TikToks are the ones where the girl's wearing the skimpy clothing and the guy walks by and goes like a quick glance because I don't know, you have eyeballs and you look at other people and they're like, look at this fucking creep. And it's like guys are like, okay, so now I can't even exist. Look, I mean, we could go into like the whole doomed society, but it's very simply put, right? Masculinity is a threat to control because a truly masculine man can't be controlled. That's all it is, right? And what is a government other than trying to control its constituents? So I'm not going to sit here and say the government is inherently evil, although I don't agree with probably 99% of the things that come out of the state Senate's mouth. And I live in New Jersey, so very liberal state as well. And, it just comes down to like at the end of the day, the way that you control society is by removing agency and removing sovereignty. And the fastest way to do that is to demasculize, right? Because a truly masculine man is someone that makes their own decisions. And then someone who makes their own decisions is a dangerous man, right? Because they're unpredictable. And that's okay. You should be able to make your own decisions, right? You should be able to protect and provide. You should be able to do everything that is required of being a man. And while it's probably not considered kosher to say that there are requirements to being a man, I think there is. If you can't stand up for yourself, if you can't stand up for your family, if you can't protect your family, and whether you're the breadwinner of your family or not, I don't really care about a financial aspect. You should still be providing in some way, shape, or form, right? If you can't do all of those things, or you're doing them at 50% of your capacity because you're shoveling chips into your body like on a weekend basis because you're watching the football game and your energy levels are so crappy that you don't even get over the food hangover until Tuesday or Wednesday, right? Then you're just not doing it to the best of your capacity. As men, we're wired for progress. We're wired to move forward and we're wired to become better. Like when you're not doing those things, you inherently become more depressed, you inherently become more anxious, and you inherently just kind of hate everything, right? But when you're actively working towards a better idealized version of yourself, all that goes away. I've never met a depressed man with goals. I haven't. You could say that you have goals like I want this. That's not a goal. If it's measurable, if you're actually taking actions, you have clearly defined steps on how to get there, depression all of a sudden magically goes away. Now, while I do believe that there's a brain chemistry aspect of that, just as a caveat, okay, I do also believe that the majority of people claiming anxiety and depression just are functioning in a society and on a day-to-day basis without any sort of active agency towards a goal. That's it. They're not actively trying to get better. Because when I was at my lowest and I was feeling the worst about myself was when I was constantly passive and just letting everything run over me. I felt like I was immobilized by the fear of actually going after a goal. I felt like I wasn't taking care of myself. I felt like I wasn't able to provide for my wife. I felt like I wasn't able to do all of those things. And so when I finally got the hell over it, and I realized that, like, oh, it literally just stems down from the fact that I don't feel like I'm getting better in any area because I'm running away from the work. Then I just started putting more effort into the work. And magically, 6 months later, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember being depressed. That was crazy. It was almost a complete afterthought. So
That's where I wanted to take this. So I'm glad you went that route. It's how is
yeah,
it affecting us as individuals to a sense of our environment. I want to point out some things you mentioned in there, which is you want to talk about relatable. When I'm my most depressed, it was when I thought society owed me everything, when I was told I was never allowed to stand up for myself through the school system, and I got bullied every single day. And then the one time I stood up for myself and stood up to the bully that used to beat me up on the bus for 200 days, I got detention.
oh
Like
yeah,
that taught me stop standing up for yourself, and then that spiraled me into a huge manic depression. And it took me getting over it to set a goal of I need to be happy. That's what moves me forward. Fast forward into the gym world. I have a goal. I'm moving forward. I'm trying to provide for my fiance at the time, now my wife. And then COVID shut me down. I got depressed because how am I supposed to provide for my family? That destroyed me. And then when I said, stop being a little bitch, Anthony, and get your shit together and figure it out, I reset myself literally the next day and said, let's figure this out. Set a goal, moved on, haven't looked back. My point being, that was it. It was the setting the goals and knowing that every day I'm progressing more and more and more and more and more where I want to be. And I'm able to go to my wife and say, hey, look, listen, I can help us here. I'm not solely reliant on you. I want you to be reliant on me because that's my job and that's what makes me happy. And it's hard to describe that unless you are truly in it. But men's job is to make their wives happy and be that protection and be that foundation of I have us, I'm your rock kind
mhm.
of idea. So that's I'm really glad you brought that up because it is so true.
Yeah. And notice how it wasn't necessarily the achievement that got you out of it. It was the effort. See, I relate this back to, like, we all had this when we were in school, unless you were like the worst student ever. But even if you were, you're going to understand what I mean by this. We internalize our self-worth and our self-value based on the effort that we put forth, not the result, right? I was prouder that I got a B in physics 2 than I was when I got an A in calculus because math was really easy and it required very little effort on my end. I just got it. I would sit in the class, we would take a quiz, and I'd be like, this makes perfect sense. Physics, on the other hand, was extremely difficult for me. For some reason, I didn't understand it. And so I had to go to the extra hours. I had to study extra hard. And when the test would come up, because we'd only get one per quarter at the high school that I went to, it took a lot of like actual effort. But when I got that B, I was prouder of that B than I was of the A, right? like couldn't wait to tell my mom that I got a B in physics 2, which was a college level course my senior year. And so when so many times we hold ourselves back from even putting forth the effort because we have this negative future projection that it's not going to be worth it because we tried in the past and it failed. And so that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, if I try, I'm going to fail anyway, so let me not try anyways. And so now I'm going to be depressed. Now I can say, well, because I'm depressed and because I'm anxious, I don't try, because that's an easier story. We're told that, hey, that's not even your fault, right? That's your brain chemistry. Well, of course your brain chemistry is off. Why wouldn't it be? Because you're making up, you're literally rewiring your brain to see something that's completely inanimate and intangible. I wouldn't say imaginary because feelings are real, but you're blaming something that is out of your control. And so by doing so, you remain the victim and you remain saying, hey, it's not my fault anymore. So there's nothing I can do about it. So I don't have to put any effort forth. When effort is the solution. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Am I kind of just like, is this making sense?
No, you're literally mentioning something I talk about in my business groups all the time, but it can be used for the general public. We start and clarify, and this isn't cynical in any way, but everything is your fault. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're blaming yourself for everything. It doesn't matter how much it feels like it's from the outside. You had some action that caused a reaction. And if you blame yourself, it's not to blame yourself and be, oh, I suck, but victimizing yourself. Now you can say, hey, it's my fault. So how do I approach the situation differently to now fix it? Now things become fixable. If I blame Brian for everything going wrong in my life, all of a sudden I'm just pushing it off and I can't fix it. It's Brian's fault. And then it's going to keep happening over and over and over again. But I have to blame Anthony. It's Anthony's fault. Brian doesn't show up on time for this podcast, which he did. But my point being, like, he sucks, horrible guest. Like, the show was horrendous. It was just a bad blah, blah, blah. No, that's my fault. It's my fault. I should have done better guest prep. I should have handled the interview differently. I should have picked a different topic. I should have composed myself differently. What could I have done to make it better, regardless of what Brian hypothetically did not do? So that is gold, what you just said.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it comes down to a lot of the internal work that I've done and that I accomplish with a lot of my clients. It's always the internal story. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks back, me and my wife got into it. Like any married couple does, you can't have a marriage without some arguments, right? So a couple of weeks back, me and my wife got into it a little bit. And, I found myself getting defensive and I found myself like, kind of like putting it back on her. Like the reason that she's feeling this way is 100% her fault and I did nothing wrong. And, I walked out of the room and it was just like the tension in the house was through the roof. The kid was already in bed. So, they didn't feel anything because my wife is really good about not arguing in front of the kid. And I like 5 minutes goes by and I compose myself and I'm like, as much as I don't necessarily understand, as much as I don't necessarily see her side 100%, there has to be something that triggered it. Now, while it may be blown out of proportion, and while I may not agree with it, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's completely like it's 100% her fault and I'm completely the victim, because then my marriage can't improve. And so after composing myself, I came back and I said, so re-explain to me what really ticked you off, right? She was kind of throwing it in my face that like over the course of the weekend, I did a couple things that like really ticked her off. Now, when I was doing them and when I look back, I was like, I thought we had a great weekend. I don't know what you're talking about. Like I was perfect, whatever. I was perfect. I'm the best. and so like I got really defensive. And so we sat down, we had the conversation. She shared her side. And I even said to her, I was like, I may not understand 100% why you're even upset by this, because in my mind, that actually isn't anything to get upset about. But that doesn't completely invalidate you. So moving forward, I'll make sure and I'll be like more communicative or whatever. I don't even remember exactly what it was because you never remember a fight after it happens, right? Like, I don't even know why she was upset. But I just took some sort of self-ownership. And I've done that in every argument over the past 3 years. and it's done wonders for my marriage. And it's not like she's asking me to change who I am inherently as a human being, because then we should probably get a divorce. But if I'm not taking any responsibility in the argument, then we can't move forward. And then I also believe that that's a lot of the reasons why the divorces happen, whether that's on the female side or the male side or whatever it may be. I just think it's a lack of responsibility taking, because we're taught that, hey, everything is everyone else's fault.
You just said it right there. And ever since I started implementing that about 2 years ago into my marriage, game changing.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, even if I don't completely agree with what she's saying or what she's talking about, and in my mind, everything went perfect. You know, the one thing I can control that we fail to admit is, guys, how we react. And how many times do you hear something, it triggers, and you're like, bah, 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 bah. And then I say, oh shit, stop being an asshole, Anthony. Take a deep breath and control how you react to that situation. So I just take a deep breath and I said, this isn't going to solve anything. So then let's have a conversation about it. And, I can control certain things to make you happy. And that should be my goals, to make you happy. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what it is. It was my fault and I could fix A, B, C, D, E. And we can work on it together. And if she does the same thing, then we have a huge path forward in our marriage. And things like fighting we don't really even fight like anymore. Like it just totally changed everything. Like in our relationship fighting to now being married, like game changing. And I combined that with, I think this is something a lot of guys and marriages can relate to, is when I used to fight with her as a girlfriend, in the back of your mind, it's always like, oh, we're fighting. This is the end of the relationship. Or, oh, is this someone I really want to be with? After we got married, I look back and I said, this girl told me in front of people that she wants to spend the rest of her life with me. Fuck, she loves me. I know, like, you did that. You're willing to associate yourself with me for the rest of your life. You have to love me. And you have to want this to work. So now when we have disagreements, I keep that in my mind. And then that thought of like, oh, this is it, never happens. Because look what she did. She got married to me. So I know that it's idiotic to drag things out and idiotic to have that thought in the back of your mind. And things get solved so much quicker and things don't ever blow out like relationship fights do. It's just a completely different mindset shift. And if most men had that when they fought with their wives, they just remembered that she agreed to marry you, like agreed in front of people, then it's a lot easier to understand, like, wow, this person really loves me. And I have to stop thinking of the extremes and take everything back now and fix how I'm reacting to the situation.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it comes down to the reason why we even go to extremes is because we don't have stress management, right? Success in any area comes down to your ability to handle more stress. It goes back to why people are addicted to food and why they drink and all that other stuff, right? Because it's a lack of stress management. So a lot of what, men need to work on and what we work on here at Unbreakable Dads in our community is stress management. How do I respond to situations? How am I conducting myself? Because as emotions, if you think about it like a seesaw, as emotions rise, logic lowers. And then as logic raises, emotions lower. And so when we understand the seesaw of how our brain works, the communication between the left and the right side, everything gets a whole lot easier, because when you lash out emotionally, you react emotionally, whether it's to food, right? Oh, I see cookies. Now I'm going to emotionally react and eat one, even though logically I know it's going to throw me off for the day. Oh, I just can't help myself. That's an emotional reaction. That's your inability to handle the stress of the situation of saying no. Or going to your in-laws' house where, your mother-in-law cooks this massive meal that's going to completely derail a week's worth of progress, but you're just not able to handle the stress of communicating to her, I'm just not going to eat this right now. And being okay with that and being solid in that. And I have had to do that for years. There's plenty of times where I'm in prep or I'm on a cut or I'm doing anything that, like, I'm working actively towards my goals. And then People put all this food out in front of me. It goes back to the stress management, right? So everything about winning with your health and fitness comes down to you and how you handle you and the stories that you tell yourself and ultimately your belief system. And that's exactly what we cover at Unbreakable Dads. All the information, tools, tactics, strategies, it's all crap you can get on ChatGPT. None of that's new. There's no such thing as new fundamentals of weight loss. Like, let's be honest, right? Like, there's no magic pill. So if you're considering even remotely to being a part of a program or being a part of a community, you have to pay attention to how they're managing or how they're sharing the inherent teachings of like a belief system and how you're going to learn how to manage you. Because even in your business group, right? Like, you guys don't necessarily always talk about like, this is my ad strategy. That's great. You need some tools. That's awesome. But like, the hammer doesn't build the house. The carpenter does. It's the mind that swings the hammer that builds the house.
Yeah. Most of the time, honestly, it's here's a action. How do I react? It's
Right.
understanding how to react to certain things in a business, because shit gets thrown at you like crazy. You're from one phone call to the next, to hopping to different parts of the business, to employees, to clients, to finances, and you're just trying to react soundly to all of them, which is why I think I've been so freaking good at stress management. Own a business. You want to learn how to deal with stress management, get 5 years into a business, and you're just going to be like, I understand, because every day it's someone screaming something at you.
Yeah.
And you just have to learn just to be like, all right, we're going to figure this out and move on. But definitely a point of topic. And Brian, I really want to wrap this episode up. So just specifically, if you could summarize this episode in 1 or 2 sentences, what would be your take-home message?
Work harder on yourself than you do on the actions towards your goals.
Love it. And then the second one, how can people find you, get a hold of you, and learn more about Unbreakable Dads?
Sure. It's easy. I communicate directly. I'm the only guy who uses my Instagram. So just go to Instagram.com or the Instagram app, type in @Unbreakable Dads. It's right here on the screen as well. And you can check out all my content. You can reach out to me directly. I'm the guy in my DMs, so you can speak to me directly. And, something I'll do, I actually really enjoyed this conversation, and something I'll do for your audience that I don't necessarily always do is I have a whole course on how to implement the FAST method, which takes down to adaptive habit chains and changing the story and monitoring belief systems and everything like that. And taking care of the 6 inches in between your ears, which is the most important real estate in the world. Right. So I have that. I typically, you could buy it for $99 or $997. But if you DM me the word redefine, so I know that you're a listener of this podcast, I'll go ahead and give you the course for free. So that's just a gift I want to give your audience. It's a gift I want to give you and to the people that, stuck out through the entire podcast. All you have to do is just DM me the word redefined, and I'll be like, here's the link. Go ahead. Free download. All for you.
I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of Health Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, hit like, share this episode with any family or friends. And if you are watching on YouTube, get over to Rumble. It is totally free. We hope to see all of you there. And don't forget, fitness is medicine. Until next time.